Right now, I'm challenging myself to see if I can make 128 Regulation H teams that are each different from one another over the course of 128 days. Why 128, you might ask? At the end of the 128 days, we're going to do something special where we battle every team against each other in a single elimination bracket to see which team emerges on top. There will be some competitively strong teams, there will be some gimmick teams, and there will be some probably a good number of goofs and gaffs in there, so if you want to follow through to the end, subscribe so that you can keep up with each day. But without further ado, let's move on to day 81. Alright everybody, welcome back to another video, and in today's video we are going to be going over a full offense dozo. Now this dozo is designed to hopefully pick up at least one KO of, and then by the time that they kind of figure out how to position around your dozo, you can maybe take another KO and then leave two opposing Pokemon on the field, and then using the other two Pokemon that you've brought other than Tatsugiri, you can hopefully pick up one more KO, and then Tatsugiri will be able to end the game with its counter or mirror coat option is the basic idea. Pretty much we don't want to be in Dozo mode for very long, we just want Dozo to pick up a KO or two. So starting off this Dozo team, we have a pretty unconventional dondozo running the choice band item, which pretty much never makes sense on them because your physical attack being high enough is usually not the problem on dondozo, it's you being positioned around. And you're still going to have that problem, but hopefully you can look at what the opponent is bringing and just use your dondozo in order to smash them with either your Giga Impact or your Thrash that you can lock into along with your normal Terra boost if you want to go for the normal Terra. Then you can just start whipping out a lot of damage, hopefully picking up Okos once you have Dozo mode activated. And for things that you can't touch with Giga Impact or Thrash, we have the Wave Crash for hitting the Ghost types, and we have the Stomping Tantrum for hitting the Rock and Steel types. Following up with our Tatsugiri, this Tatsugiri is designed to survive being the last Pokemon left on the field in the 1v1, and like 90% of the time you will always win the 1v1 because you have a Focus Sash, which means that you can always take at least one hit unless it's like a multi-hit move where the opponent has like a way to stall with Toxic or something like that. But hopefully once you've left the last Pokemon on the field, you can afford to protect them out if they have like a Fake Out or something like that they can just try throwing at you but only one time, and then whenever they go for the attacking move, you can choose to counter it if they are not a physical ghost type, which is mostly just Annihilate is the one that you'll have to worry about, or they're not a special attacking dark type, which is mostly just Hydreigon that you'd have to worry about, but there's probably another special attacking dark type that I'm not thinking about. But we also just have the Muddy Water in case maybe you need to get rid of one Pokemon or just deal spread damage with Tatsugiri in order to end the game. You can do that too. We are Terra Ghost on the Tatsugiri just so we can dodge normal and fighting type moves, maybe go for that Muddy Water option, but Ghost also means that we can't be faked out, so if the opponent decides to fake out and then attack into Tatsugiri, then we can get our counter or our mirror coat off. Next we got Hisui and Lilligant, and I knew on this team I wanted a fighting type with coaching, and Lilligant is a pretty nice one because not only can it coaching for all of our physical attackers, it can also after you them, so even though a lot of them are pretty slow, they can actually just use Lilligant's speed to attack, and then if we either take an attack after getting the coaching, or we just protect them out, and then we start using Lilligant to after you, we can do a lot of pretty good damage pretty quickly. As well, Lilligant just has its own attacking options in the Stab Leaf Blade and the Stab Close Combat. And we have the Covert Cloak on Hisui and Lilligant since Tatsugiri is using our Focus Sash, but Covert Cloak's not so bad on Lilligant as it does allow us to dodge the Fake Out, and since we're using Covert Cloak to dodge the Fake Out, we can make ourselves Terra Dark so that we're not weak to Psychic type moves, but we're also not being affected by Prankster Pokemon. Up next, of course, whenever we're using that Hisui and Lilligant, a Torkoal is pretty sure to follow, and our Torkoal is just a pretty base all-fire type move. Torkoal with the ability to protect, and we're not going super heavy on the damage, we're just going with our Charcoal for the 1.2 times boost in our fire type damage whenever we're in the sun, hopefully, and using that Terra Fire, then we can deal a lot of fire type damage when Lilligant after using the Torkoal, letting us immediately use the Eruption, which will just absolutely nuke the opponent, as well as the Heat Wave for perhaps if our health is going to get lowered by the opponent using Extreme Speed or Sucker Punch or something like that. And for the Pokemon that have Wide Guard, we also have the Weather Ball on Torkoal. Next up, we got Conkeldurr, and the only reason I put Conkeldurr on this team is because I knew I was using the After You Lilligant, and I wanted to use After You Focus Punch, which is a super super niche strategy where Focus Punch is a move that does 150 base power, but it will only ever go off if this Pokemon was not attacked during the turn. However, you can after you into Focus Punch Pokemon to allow them to immediately act. So if Lilligant is the fastest Pokemon on the field and Conkeldurr is probably one of the slower Pokemon on the field, we can use Lilligant's speed to immediately allow us to use that 150 base power Focus Punch. And if we use Lilligant to coaching Conkeldurr on the Protect turn wherever it activates its Flame Orb Guts, there's going to be really nothing that takes this Focus Punch unless it's a Ghost type. As well, we just also have 2 tech moves in the knockoff, and the Fire Punch also synergizes with our Sun a little bit. And we're also Terra Steel so that we're not weak to the Psychic, Fairy, and Flying type moves being thrown at us. Next up, we have an actual Steel type in Metagross, and Metagross is just kind of here to be tanky, a little bit tankier on the special side to maybe allow us to be opposing Lilycoles since we're not max speed Lilligant. It's a little risky to be using Lilycole to counter our Lilycole, even though we have Dondozo Tatsugiri to handle it. But Metagross is just another decent all-around physical attacker with that clear body ability, meaning that we won't be getting intimidated or having any of our stats dropped. We can coaching into Metagross pretty safely to start chaining damage on it. As well as the Bullet Punch gives us a little bit of priority for perhaps getting the Focus Sashes on Pokemon whenever Dondozo attacks into them and they're able to take the hit. Then we also have the Heavy Slam for doing our good Steel type damage, as well as the Psychic Fangs for doing our stabbed Psychic type damage, and the Stomping Tantrum is tacked on in case there's a Fake Out being thrown into Metagross' slot. Then we can Stomping Tantrum on the next turn and get a lot of base power, but also the ground coverage is good to have. And we're Terra Water because water gives us a lot of good resistances. But yeah, that's the basic gist of the team. Let's get into some battles. Alright, so we actually have 4 battles today, which is a specialty for Dozo week here, as we normally only have 3. Just because, again, you know, once you've seen one Dozo, you've seen them all. Even if the Dozos that we've been using for Dozo week are a little bit more variable. But the opponent does have some things to counter us, as they're using the Pelipper Archaludon Rain, it looks like. They also have the Dusclops Trick Room, as well as maybe an Exploding Electrode for their Dusclops Trick Room. But they immediately just decided to lead Pelipper and Electrode, which is great because we led Lilligant and Torkoal. And I figured that even if they decide to bring in Pelipper later, the nice thing about leading Lilligant Torkoal on this team is that we can immediately just switch Torkoal out for Dondozo, not only saving our Sun for later, but now we also get the damage boost on our Wave Crash, and Lilligant can just start by coaching into Dondozo. So if there's a water attack being thrown into Torkoal, Dondozo is going to resist it, and hopefully it'll have a defense boost for the attack. But Torkoal's slower, so it gets its Sun, and Pelipper immediately goes for Wide Guard, but I read that this was probably going to happen, so we Weather Ball into the Electrode. So Electrode was probably going to try and explode there, if I had to guess, since Pelipper's Wide Guard also allows it to dodge the Electrode's explosion, but Electrode doesn't quite get to do that. As they bring in Tauros here, their Tauros is not Intimidate, which tells me that they are using the Anger Point strategy with Meowscarada, which is not something that I thought about, but however, us bringing Lilligant definitely does help stop that strategy a little bit, because we could just use the After You into Torkoal to still do a lot of good eruption damage. And Dondozo is unaware, so we don't care about the Anger Point from the Tauros. But we do bring in Dondozo here in order to coaching in front of the Tauros, as I was hoping to catch a Fire-type move since it was still going to be boosted, but catching the close combat is still 100% absolutely fine. Also, it would have been fine if they had decided to KO Lilligant on this turn, because that would allow us to get in Tatsugiri for free. But they instead decide to Hurricane at 50% accuracy into the Lilligant, and they land the Hurricane, which does allow us to bring in Tatsugiri for free instead. They decide to swap to Archaludon here, but we Stomping Tantrum to that slot, and Archaludon is going to go down to our +3 Stomping Tantrum. As now Tauros comes back in and tries close combating, but it ends up just lowering its own defense. And Hurricane comes out, but Stomping Tantrum picks up the KO into Tauros. And now we're in an awkward spot where they can't, like... Oh, actually, I started the battle again. Now we're in an awkward spot where, because we locked Stomping Tantrum on Pelipper, Pelipper has to kill Dondozo here in order for the battle to progress. So the opponent could just stall out their own Tailwind, set a Tailwind again, and then KO Dondozo, so they would have a total of like 3 Tailwind turns. But because Dondozo was able to get the 3 KOs, it would depend on whether or not they decide to Hurricane into Tatsugiri, because any other attack Tatsugiri can safely Mirror Coat out of. It's just that Hurricane has that chance to confuse. Up next, we got a full Pelipper, Caledon, Basculate, Leech, and Rain team, but they also have the Rillaboom support, and you never want to see Rillaboom when you're running the Dondozo, as it puts a lot of pressure on you, but you also never want to see Rillaboom next to Electabuzz, because Electabuzz will just redirect all of the damage for Rillaboom. And because Rillaboom's grassy terrain is probably going to get set up, even if you were running Earthquake for avoiding the Electabuzz's redirection, it's going to soften the damage for Electabuzz greatly. So the opponent does lead Rillaboom and Electabuzz here, but we lead Lilligant and Dondozo, as I wanted to use our Terra Normal to test just how much damage Dondozo could get out here, but also to maybe try and bait the Rillaboom a little bit. And Rillaboom decides to Grassy Glide, which is kind of smart because they get to move before we coaching the Dondozo, but now we get the coaching onto Dondozo. We try Thrashing, but it goes into Electabuzz's Protect there, so they swap our Caledon here, and there's a 50-50 chance of the slot that we get it into being good, but again it goes into the wrong slot. But even though we kind of unnecessarily after-U'd here, because what I really should have done on this turn was just coaching into Dondozo again, but I wanted Dondozo to definitely act before Rillaboom in case Rillaboom went for a Wood Hammer into the slot. But looking back on it now, I definitely think the coaching to get another boost on Dondozo and also increase its attack would have been a little bit more safe in more scenarios. But, I mean, even the resisted Thrash here from onto our Caledon still does a lot to our Caledon. It's just unfortunate that it gets a bit of Grassy Chip here, because our close combat comes out to it and it is not able to KO our Caledon, but it does gain another defense boost, and they body press into Dondozo, but Dondozo's unaware, but Lilligant is going to get knocked out by Hurricane, as Thrash again targets our Caledon, but our Caledon at least gets the takeout here as Grassy Terrain heals us up. They bring in Torkoal just to pressure their Pelipper a little bit, as they can no longer safely just Hurricane or Weather Ball into anything really, because the Weather Ball is no longer stabbed for them, and the Hurricane is 50% accuracy. And we also get to pressure Rillaboom a good bit with the Torkoal here. They decided to swap Electabuzz, and I figured that something was going to swap, so I formed the full Dondozo mode so that we can save Pelipper for their rain later. And they tried faking out Torkoal, but unfortunately Dondozo hits itself in confusion, which is going to happen whenever you're using Thrash, is that you're going to hit yourself in confusion sometimes. Electabuzz goes for the Electro Web, lowering Dondozo's speed, and Rillaboom has Bullet Seed loaded dice is what it looks like, so they actually do have a higher chance to crit us. As we see there, they critted us on the second Bullet Seed hit, but Thrash gets to take out Electabuzz there because Electabuzz deserved it. I was going to say it was redirecting, but it was not redirecting. Electabuzz just deserved it. But Rillaboom, Bullet Seeding again, and I think that, oh yeah, even with the speed drop, the Dondozo is faster. Unfortunately, we do not get to target the Rillaboom slot once again. It ends up targeting Pelipper, and Pelipper's Focus Sash, so Dondozo doesn't get to take a KO there. Because they only have 2 Pokemon left, we get to take the Weather Control here with our Torkoal, and I protect with Tatsugiri, as I know that Tatsugiri is a pretty safe endgame at this point. And they do just decide to double into Torkoal, but I don't think the Hurricane would have taken out Torkoal even if it landed. So Heat Wave gets to take out Pelipper here, and we Heat Wave into Rillaboom, which still does a lot of damage. And I'm countering with Tatsugiri, which this is a bit of a misplay because I forgot the fact that they have Bullet Seed, which means that they have a way around Tatsugiri's Focus Sash with the whole counter thing. So I could just be clicking Muddy Water onto Rillaboom here, and even though we're in Sun, it would still probably be doing good amounts of damage. They whiff the high horsepower here, but we also whiff the Heat Wave, so that's a bit of a fair trade in my opinion. Nothing actually happens on this turn. High horsepower goes into Rillaboom, and these are also turns that I could flat out just be protecting with the Torkoal. The opponent is using Fake Out on Rillaboom to try and stall my counters, I guess. But Sun ends, and we protect Tatsugiri, and the opponent is still faking out here, and they do eventually just decide to go for the Bullet Seed, and it is a roll here, because we saw the first one did 18%, and the second one did 22%, and the third one did 20%, so the average here is not great for us. But thankfully the Bullet Seed only hits 4 times, and we critical hit the Muddy Water, but since the Sun is gone, the critical hit does not matter. So I almost threw that game entirely there. I really should have just attacked with the Muddy Water into the Rillaboom, but I was so keen on getting the counter off with Tatsugiri that I just wanted it to happen.
We have a pretty good team comp here. It's got the Alolan Ninetales Snow for like Excalibur shenanigans, but they can also lead Garchomp and Talonflame and immediately exert pressure with Tailwind Earthquake, or they could lead Vivillon and like start putting our opposing Pokemon to sleep because it's hard to keep our weather control up with Torkoal when they have Alola Tails. So the game starts out and we lead Tatsugiri and Torkoal here, as I wanted to use Tatsugiri in order to perhaps attack something like the Talonflame. And I also wanted to lead Torkoal in case they were going to try and lead something like the Alolan Ninetales, but we don't see either of those Pokemon get led here. We just see the Garchomp, which is kinda okay. It depends on what the Vivillon decides to target. Garchomp immediately goes Terra Steel here and goes for the Earthquake into the Tatsugiri, and Vivillon dodges it, as Vivillon thankfully decides to try and put to sleep Torkoal, reading it as the Pokemon more than likely to attack if it like went for a Terra or something, or Dondozo swaps in here. But Tatsugiri goes for the counter and is able to take out Garchomp here with a nice KO. So we won't get the late game Tatsugiri, but being able to take out the Garchomp there is pretty nice. They set up the Aurora Veil and they put the Torkoal to sleep with their probably compound eyes, meaning the sleep powder is pretty accurate. And they reveal that they have Freeze Dry on the Ninetales as they put Dondozo to sleep as well. But Torkoal actually gets to wake up here and it gets off the full damage Eruption, which is the nice thing about our opponent kind of stalling here with their Aurora Veil and sleep powdering our own Pokemon, is that we get the chance to wake up with Torkoal at full health here. But even if the turn went on after this, if Torkoal was still asleep, they're still not exerting any pressure into the Torkoal, so it benefits us to just keep Torkoal on the field and not form that full Dondozo mode yet. But we get good damage into both Pokemon, and then in comes the Excalibur, and we brought in Dondozo or Tatsugiri to form the full Dondozo mode, as Blizzard does come out here, and Dondozo does not quite yet wake up. As Freeze Dry comes on to Dozo again, and they try Icicle Spearing into the Dondozo, but we still resist it. So Dondozo is going to take its third sleep turn, unfortunately. So we do average our sleep turns between Dondozo and Torkoal. So fair enough at this point. Scale Shot misses the Dondozo as we wake up and we get a Giga Impact into Excalibur, but it doesn't quite do as much damage as I was hoping it was. I was trying to maybe get it within Heat Wave range of Torkoal while Snow is up, but I'm not sure if it is now. And they do get the Scale Shot into Dondozo on this turn. But now we bring in Torkoal, and we still have Tatsugiri. And I kind of want them to KO Tatsugiri because I believe I have Lilligant in the back at this point, and Lilligant can just handle pretty much everything as long as we have the weather. But they decide not to kill Tatsugiri on this turn, which is a little unfortunate. But I protected Tatsugiri here, and I just kind of hope that Torkoal will live the attack. And they do just throw a Scale Shot into Torkoal, which does a lot of Torkoal's health. But since Ninetales has revealed itself to be both Blizzard and Freeze Dry, I guess there's nothing that they really could put on Ninetales to touch Torkoal, but Torkoal just gets to clean Heat Wave both slots here. And Vivillon, even though it's spamming that sleep powder, it can only put to sleep one Pokemon, and thankfully Tatsugiri is able to land the Muddy Water onto Vivillon that we need. It's a bit of a strange game there where we had to use the late game Tatsugiri in order to immediately get rid of a threat rather than getting rid of the last threat that the opponent had on the team. But I mean, that's the kind of benefit of the surprise of this Tatsugiri. And lastly, we have a team with a pretty good spread of Mons here. I'm really not quite sure what they're doing because they might have Sinistcha for like Trick Room stuff with Goodra, but also none of their other Pokemon really scream Trick Room. Like, they scream a lot of priority with like Sneasler with the Fake Out, and Scizor perhaps with the Bullet Punch, and the Dragonite who might have Extreme Speed. But battle starts and we get to lead Conkeldurr and Metagross here in order to hopefully catch, I think I was hoping to catch the Dragonite off guard. But Metagross likes seeing Sneasler because even if Sneasler fakes out into Metagross, Metagross can Stomping Tantrum into Sneasler on the next turn and then Bullet Punch it if it's Focus Sash. But they do in fact fake out into Metagross and they get the crit flinch there, and Shadow Ball does a lot of damage to Metagross, but we're Assault Vest, so we take it pretty good, and we knock off the Sinistcha, getting rid of its berry as Conkeldurr's Guts activates. They protect their Sneasler this turn, and I was bullet punching for a reason that I don't quite remember. I think I just thought that Metagross was going to get KO'd since we saw that the Sinistcha was faster than it on... No, what was I doing? I really should have just Stomping Tantrumed into the Sneasler like I just mentioned, and then use the Fire Punch with Conkeldurr to try and take out Sinistcha on this turn, and then if they did damage into Metagross, it I mean, it would probably be fine. But now they bring in Dragonite here, and then they bring in Pelipper, and I Bullet Punch Dragonite because I thought it might be multi-scale, as they just Dragon Claw into Conkeldurr, but we get to do a lot of knockoff damage into them on Dragonite, and now we bring in Torkoal in order to get rid of their rain, and we Bullet Punch Dragonite, and as we saw, that crit does not matter, but Pelipper gets up a Tailwind here at least as they return Sneasler to the field, and I thought a Fake Out was going to go into Metagross slot, and it does, so we just get to swap Conkeldurr here, and they do Wide Guard with Pelipper here, which makes me wish that I went for the Weather Ball in order to try and hit Sneasler for some damage, and here I put the opponent in kind of a weird spot where they can either choose to double into Torkoal in case Torkoal is going to attack on this turn, or they can choose to take out Conkeldurr here, and if they don't take out Conkeldurr, then we get to click a Focus Punch into Sneasler, which will do a lot of damage to it, but if they do take out Conkeldurr on the next turn, we get to bring in Lilligant, and Lilligant will be able to even the playing field a little bit more. But they do end up just Dire Clawing into the Conkeldurr here, and we dodge a Hydro Pump, which you normally don't see the Pelippers run. But now Lilligant is on the field, and we swap Metagross here in order to catch the Sneasler's move, because if the Sneasler didn't attack into the Lilligant there, it would have been super easy for us to just after you Torkoal in order to get Torkoal to move. But thankfully, not only did they not close combat with Sneasler, they went for Dire Claw, which we catch with our Steel typing, and we get the Weather Ball into Sneasler, which now puts it into Bullet Punch range, which Metagross gets to take out, and Hydro Pump comes out from Pelipper, but on our last turn of Sun, we get to do a pretty good amount of Weather Ball damage to it. As on the next turn, Hydro Pump is going to be able to take out Torkoal, but we do a lot of damage to Pelipper with the Psychic Fangs, and lastly, we get to Bullet Punch Pelipper in order to finish it off there.
So unfortunately we didn't get to after you a Focus Punch on Conkeldurr, but it would have been neat. So yeah, that was the full offense Dondozo, and as you saw, the main core pieces is Dondozo, Tatsugiri, Lilligant, and Torkoal, and Conkeldurr and Metagross are kind of just here to shore up the matchups that these 4 Pokemon can't win, but there's probably better Pokemon to slot into the Conkeldurr and Metagross slots depending on what you want your playstyle to be, and the Focus Punches on Conkeldurr is definitely more of a niche option that we didn't even get to use during the team battles, but I still think it's neat. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, maybe consider leaving a like on the video, and even consider subscribing, because both of those things would help me out an absolute ton, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.